The film Rear Window by master director and everyone's favorite Where's Waldo cameo performer Alfred Hitchcock serves as one of his very best films, in my opinion, representing a period where he was in many ways working at the peak of his powers. This would in turn give rise to top-notch performances in a feature which cooks up a very simple premise of a man unraveling a crime through his voyeuristic practice of spying on his fellow neighbors situated in a neighborhood courtyard. I will in this short video do a quick analysis on the opening sequence of the film, which manages to do three things among others very effectively in my opinion, namely, number 1, deliver an enveloping sense of milieu for what will serve as the location in the film, number 2, providing a backstory through visual means for its featuring characters. In general, it can be argued that this is Hitchcock's perhaps most visual film, in the sense that so much of the narration is conveyed through visual means. Finally, number 3, making a tongue-in-cheek commentary, if you will, on the role movie viewers themselves take on. Starting by iterating through the first point, in the opening scenes we see Hitchcock spending quite a substantial running time on establishing the local neighborhood, which will function as the sole environment of the film. Hitchcock can therefore be seen as setting up a dilation in time in order as to function both as familiarizing the film's audience with the celluloid constructed sets in terms of the urban landscape, as well as reflecting the boredom of the main protagonist, here played by James Stewart, who is seen begrudgingly going about his day in boredom while basking in the sun. This opening scene can also be seen in contrast to the opposing element of the contraction of time seen in the very end scenes of the film, where the dramaturgy gets sped up and we see the main protagonist struggling as the murderer approaches in what is revealed to be a very physically exhausting dramatic struggle. This will in turn end with the personal development arc of the protagonist, where the murderer in question has done away with the murder of his wife for the innocent man, whether he likes it or not, and James Stewart's character Jeff has, as a result, indeed got more than he bargained for. This is seen in a loss of his own personal innocence, which has made it impossible for him to make a return to his old exotic capricious living as that of a photographer enveloped in dangerous situations, if you will. In total, then, the sense of environment which Hitchcock through production design has essentially set up is that of a closed-off cavern of sorts, which lends insight into the microcosm of the city life seen here through sets which function as a stage, scenery, and as a potential for the suspension of belief. Moving along, the opening's focus on developing backstories can be seen both in relation to the main character of Jeff, as well as the creation of essentially mini backstories for the background characters of the neighborhood. In the opening, we see for instance an elderly couple who have been romantically engaged on the balcony, while panning to the left, we witness a young blonde nymph practicing her dance routine, who, much like the Greek nymphs, which also served as spirits, will be invariably bound to her apartment throughout the film. The young dancer could also be taken to signify the yearning of youth, as idealized through an adolescent infatuation phase for our main character, who seems to be lamenting the simpler, uncommitted younger days where he was more free to partake in risk adventures in line with his vocation, which he holds so dear. Other neighborhood elements include the exchange with the red-haired woman and the curious neighbor tending his garden, which plays as an early allusion to the events of the murder transpiring later in the film. And lastly, the lonely composer sweating away at his piano in hopes for an inspired moment to come his way. The middle-aged composer could here represent an alternative life placement for our protagonist, following a path in which he does not end up marrying the socialite girlfriend of Lisa, here played by the wonderful Grace Kelly. It is as if the film hints at a normative standard following along the lines of 1950s mentality of living, in which man is at his happiest and by extension most at home when he is engaged in the conservative bourgeois culture life constructed around a nuclear family. Along these same lines, an interesting observation to make regarding the female leads in general in Hitchcock films is that he casts them according to status quo roles in society, belonging to the given time period. These women, like Lisa in the film, are not feminist though, however, but nonetheless end up performing unorthodox actions, thus playing against the viewer's expectations of their character, as when Lisa hunts for evidence or when she digs in the flower bed with the other female character Stella in the film. Finally, focusing in on the main protagonist in the film's opening, we again see that the narration is told through visual means, starting with the associated boredom of being tied to a chair with a cast on his leg. We see Jeff here sweating in the sun and complaining about the mundane trivialities concerning his local decor of the neighborhood activities. Oddly enough, setting up such brilliantly visual shots in the very beginning of the film from Hitchcock, the neighborhood seems anything but boring for me upon the first viewing, full of colorful brilliancy and a vivacity of life, which again exemplifies how time is perceived different from the protagonist's vantage point and the audience viewer's perspective. Furthermore, no film dialogue is needed in order to convey the blanks as to why Jeff is wearing a cast, as to quote, "It is the camera and not a dialogue which explains why the hero of Rear Window has a broken leg, photos of the racing car in his room, along with the broken camera." Moving to the last point which I wish to discuss from our list, we can see the opening of Rear Window as making a commentary on the voyeurism of Jeff spying on his neighbors with binoculars to the voyeuristic practice which comprises the movie-watching experience itself, where we as moviegoers are left in an idle position in relation to the events appearing before us on screen. However, unlike the fictitious courtyard of Rear Window, where Jeff may be caught as an imposing gazer or a peeping Tom, if you will, the audience members take the backseat to what is a three-way relationship, essentially, between the director, who has concocted a stage full with smoke and mirrors, scene taking place in a Hollywood courtyard for his own creative endeavor, the representation of the finished product, which lives in a finalized abstract celluloid medium, and the audience members themselves. The viewers of the film might then be seen as a rather passive element in all of this, but ideally should be anything but. In fact, it is through the invocations of theater and cinema, which comprises the opening scenes, that audience members should use these very notions as metaphors for the further exploration of the very action that takes place within the constructed space by the director and its inhabitants. Here, the theme being the persistent ethical dilemma of surveillance taken up in the film. Oh, and on a final note, I just wanted to point out that the use of distance to the opposing neighbors, as seen when Jeff is engaged in spying, is clear technical mastery in my humble opinion from the production side of things. In fact, these scenes were used as an inspiration of sorts for the construction of the opposing apartment seen in Paul Verhoeven's 2000 film Hollow Man, starring its very own peeping Tom in the guise of Kevin Bacon, who will not only hide unseen to the eye in his apartment while perusing, but also in turn make himself invisible as the movie progresses.